Number 15. Fleeing police. Traveling through a tunnel on a train is frightening enough. The darkness, the enclosed space, not knowing what's going on around you. But Redditor Murderous Budgie offers one more reason to fear the tunnel. He was traveling in Queens, New York, when the train entered a tunnel. That's when it came to an abrupt halt. The air and lights vanished. People began wondering what was going on, and soon found out that a man who had tried to flee the police through the tunnel had collided with the train. The power had been turned off so that the police could go retrieve him. The Redditor explains, "We could hear him screaming in the tunnel. The guy survived." Many in the thread wonder who this suspect was and what he was fleeing from. There's more to this story, and we all want to know what it is. Number 14. The Mouth Breather. Creepy people on public transit is pretty much inescapable. If you ride the subway enough, it will eventually happen to you in one way or another. Redditor Frosted _ wrote about what he describes as a clearly insane guy who entered the train when Frosted was around 16 years old. The crazy decided to stand in front of an 18-year-old woman and just breathe heavily over her. Frosted explains, "We were the only ones on the train before he got on, and we both looked at each other, and I nodded my head and raised my hand, a slight gesture that if he did something I'd intervene." Frosted said the creep kept staring at her. Even after he sat down and stopped hovering, the woman was obviously uncomfortable. Who wouldn't be? Leaving her seat to be closer to the only other person on the train, the Redditor. The pair started talking, and Frosted said he would have tried to help if anything had happened with the man. Suddenly, the man in question jumped up. Frosted prepared his 140-pound self to defend against a 200-pound man, but luckily he was clever enough to steer him off the train with only his words. Many in the comments of this post describe similar experiences with unwanted attention on public transit. And it also seems that t-shirts with marker writing is the common clothing of these individuals. So I guess the takeaway from this is, steer clear of homemade t-shirts, although I think we already knew that. Number 13. The Clown. Redditor Complicated shares this story of a subway trip in Seoul, South Korea. He was in a subway with a clown when the train completely stopped in a tunnel. Korean came over the loudspeaker explaining that someone had thrown themselves in front of the train. A Complicated writes, "The clown looked at me, I looked at the clown. He decided at that point that it was his job to entertain our car, and I was his unwilling stooge." Imagine being notified of such a horrific event, and then having to endure a clown's attempt at entertainment as you wait for the body to be cleared from the tracks. Truly a bizarre event to say the least. Number 12. The Almost Flood. When heavy rainfall increases the likelihood of flash floods, it's best to stay at home and not risk jumping on public transit. Redditor There's a Fap for that knows that firsthand, as he attempted to take a PATH train from New York City to New Jersey in the late 90s during a huge storm. He writes, "All of a sudden, about halfway under the Hudson, the PATH stops and everyone could see water in the tunnel outside rising. I was never so scared in my life." If you've ever been in a similar situation, you'll probably know the crazy imagery and ideas that pop into your head, worst case scenarios and potential survival strategies. The train eventually started moving again, albeit very slowly, but the Redditor says that's legit the most scared he's ever been. I'd say that's quite understandable. Number 11. The Rock Thrower. Redditor The Decisive Jedi wrote about a scary encounter while traveling on a train in Mumbai, India. In India, the train doors are often open with people hanging out, clasping onto the handles and bars. He says people do this both for the thrill and because the trains are overcrowded. As the Redditor's train traveled through a slum, a random kid threw a stone at the moving train, which knocked a random commuter who stood right in front of the Redditor. The man didn't fall out of the train, thankfully, but when he fell in, other commuters could see the cut gleaming all over his face. As the horror seems to have stuck with the Redditor for a while, he writes, "I kept on dreaming about the same incident over and over again, about a scenario of him falling out of the train, and woke up out of the bed for nearly a week after the incident. Can't blame him. That image is enough to give the bravest of us nightmares." Number 10. Our own mortality. While many of these entries occurred in the US, scary public transit stories are definitely not relegated to America. Redditor Andromeda 321 moved to the Netherlands, where she had to rely on public transit to get around. Often, if someone jumps in front of the train, the rail line is shut down for hours so that police can investigate the scene and make sure no foul play went down. Well, according to the Redditor, she heard one person a week ends their life this way in the Netherlands. The worst experience she had was on a return home from the North Country. She and her colleagues were almost to the station and were standing between carriages because there were no free seats. That's when the train came to a halt. She explains, "The body was right under where we were. I didn't look out, but I guess you could see the man's dentures on the other side." A 6-year-old started crying because she realized for the first time her own mortality. I can only imagine the mental toll an event like this would have on a person. Number 9. The rope. At times, it's not so much the public transport itself that you should be afraid of. It's the people waiting with you at the stop. Redditor Bees Are Eating My Brain wrote of one scary London night when she was at a bus stop alone at 11 p.m. A man with a backpack and wearing a hoodie approached to wait at the other side of the stop, looking over at her in a creepy manner. She describes what happened next. He took off his backpack and pulled a pair of gloves and a rope from it, put the gloves and backpack on, and then began wrapping the rope around his left hand. She didn't wait around to see what was up with that rope, because just as she stepped onto the road, getting ready to race across the street, her bus appeared. She raced onto it, but that's not where her nightmare ends. She writes, "While the bus was pulling away, I looked out the window at the scary man, and he was staring at me intensely, with the rope wrapped around his left hand, and his right holding it taut. If that's not an image that sticks in your mind, I don't know what is." Number 8. The Ultra Creeper. When someone's creeping on you and you have nowhere to go, you only have 2 options: ignore it or stand your ground. Redditor 90-pound Glutton stood her ground. She wrote that when she boarded a bus that was largely empty, after choosing her seat, she noticed someone move from another seat to the one right behind her. Though she thought that was strange, she tried not to think about it. But soon she had to think about it. The bus moved forward, and after a few minutes passed, she felt someone touch her side. It was the man who had changed places to be close to her. He was reaching around her seat to touch her. When she turned around to glare, he apologized and sat back, but soon he was at it again. This time she turned around and addressed him verbally, telling him to keep his hands to himself. Then she changed seats. But once the bus stopped and more passengers climbed on board, she noticed someone sit next to her, and after a moment she felt a hand on her knee. It was him again. She shouted at him, and he responded by claiming it was an accident. But this time she wasn't alone. A woman who'd seen the whole incident had her back. The woman started shouting at the creep, who shouted back. Then the bus driver finally got involved and said the guy would be kicked off at the next stop. This didn't deter the shouting match between the creeper and the woman, who said she'd be getting off at the next stop to settle this once and for all. And she did get off after him. 90-pound Glutton calls the woman a public transportation warrior. Pretty sure we all agree on that one. Number 7. Darkness. Sometimes laughter is the best medicine. Other times it could lead to the loss of your life. An anonymous Redditor claims he almost passed away on public transit in Brooklyn because his bus driver was laughing so hard he lost control. He goes on to say that he was on a bus when this familiar-looking man got on and sat nearby. After a moment, he realized the man looked familiar for a reason. He was Charlie Murphy from The Chappelle Show. Although the Redditor was a big fan, Murphy had his kid along, so he didn't bother him. but other people weren't so interested in a famous person's privacy. After a time of absolute silence on the bus, someone shouted out "darkness," a famous saying from a skit on the show. The Redditor writes, "Everyone loses it, including the bus driver, and we went from laughing to terrified in 1 second. Luckily, no one got hurt, and even Charlie Murphy found the situation funny." Well, who wouldn't? Rest in peace to a legendary comedian. Number 6. Twilight Zone. This one's straight out of the Twilight Zone. Redditor Daryl YK shares his story about an 11-hour bus trip to Iowa City. The Redditor spent the whole trip in the rear of the bus, mostly sleeping. On one occasion, he awoke to find nobody there. The Redditor writes, "No driver, no passengers, no leftover luggage except mine. Bus was parked in a gas station parking lot. Gas station was closed and obviously been closed for years." Although a car eventually appeared some 15 minutes later with the replacement bus driver, who said he'd overslept. Those must have been the scariest 15 minutes of his life. Number 5. Don't leave me. It's often the case that some folks on public transit aren't right in the head. Redditor Steer experienced just such a case on her way home after school in New York City. She boarded the public bus and sat beside the window while an old man sat alongside her. Although she had her earbuds in, he seemed to be looking at and speaking with her, but she ignored it. When she removed her earbuds, she discovered he was talking about his wife. She writes, "I was getting a little creeped out and I decided I would get off a few stops ahead and just walk home. When I told him I had to get up, he said, 'No, stay with me, don't leave.' As she continued to insist that this was her stop, he continued to insist that she not leave, saying, 'I want you to come with me.' Thankfully, some other young woman noticed and stepped in. When the man refused to move, the girls started shouting at him, and although the old man finally caved, he still insisted that this Redditor was his daughter. I've had lots of weird people experiences on New York trains and buses, but this one was the creepiest," she writes. Not a surprise, seems pretty terrifying. Let's hope this man got the help he needed. Number 4. Maggots. Creepy crawly things are not welcome anywhere, but especially not on public transit. Redditor Nigel with the Brie shares his experience with some unwelcome critters on another New York subway. People often eat on the subway, which Nigel doesn't understand because public transit is often so disgusting. But when has that ever stopped anyone from doing something? Someone had dropped some crumbs on the ground and Nigel writes, "I looked down and there are literally maggots writhing around next to me." If that's not enough to make you shudder, Nigel adds that some NYC subway lines are known to be bedbug ridden too. He ends his tale saying that he can't wait to leave. It sounds to me like Nigel didn't have the best experience in New York City. Number 3. Rapid German. Redditor Major Mustard was in Frankfurt and riding the S-Bahn. Instead of paying for a ticket, he borrowed his host brother's transit card. He was able to use it the whole time without a problem, until one day the conductor entered their car with a look that could terrify you. If that wasn't scary enough, the woman approached the pair requesting their tickets. Having only had about a month of German, Mustard's speech was lacking to say the least. He didn't understand and just mimicked his friend. After looking at the card, she gave him the glare and spoke rapidly in German. Although he didn't understand a word of it, his friend managed to tell him to sign the back of the card under his breath. The Redditor writes, "So here I was, 17-year-old kid from Wisconsin, forging a signature in a foreign country beneath the eyes of an official." She snapped the card from him after he'd finished and gave it a long glare. After she was satisfied, she gave it back to the boy and continued on to terrify other non-law-abiding passengers. Number 2. The Group. Public transit can be a pretty bad time. Like this story demonstrates, Redditor Wally Plumsteed grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He was 13 when he and a friend decided to go to the movies, which they did on a weekly basis. This time, however, they had to take the train all the way to Manhattan Because the neighborhood theater wasn't showing what they wanted to see, nothing went down on the way to Manhattan, but on the way home, Wally left his friend at his stop and then continued onward to his connecting train. He had the subway car to himself. In fact, the one next to it was empty too. Instead of enjoying the entire place to himself, he switched to another car that was fuller. Some guy in a leather jacket blocked his path and claimed the other cars were closed. Although Wally knew this wasn't true, he didn't want to start anything. So he returned to his empty car and his seat. Leather Jacket and his friends viewed his response as weakness and decided to take advantage. A metal dart came flying into the car and landed near Wally's feet. Leather Jacket and the group yelled at Wally to pick it up and then launched aggressively into the car. The dude who threw the dart demanded that he pick it up. Wally obliged, only to have the dude throw it at his legs repeatedly, each time ordering him to pick it up and hand it back to him. Screaming and crying and trying to block his legs, 13-year-old Wally was an easy target for these brutes. After growing bored with the dart throwing, the group all struck at once in the stomach, the chest, and the face. He tried to break free and run to the next car, where there were people, but one of the group was blocking the door as the lookout. He trapped him in, throwing him back to his friends. Wally fell to his knees and pulled out all the money he had, which was one small dime. He offered it to them and pleaded that they leave him alone. After Leather Jacket took the dime, they still weren't through. They grew more and more scary, throwing his head into the windows. When the glass panes didn't shatter, as they seemingly wanted them to, they gave up on that idea after half a dozen rams. The entire group raced out of the car once they'd reached the final stop, all but one, the leader. Surprisingly, he pulled out his wallet and offered Wally a couple bucks, maybe to try to keep him quiet, but with pride, Wally refused. Although he tried to report the incident to the conductor, he couldn't find him, and he didn't report it to police either, because he felt he couldn't positively identify those involved. Noting that the group who did this must be in their 50s now, Wally wrote, "Their friends and families, wives and kids probably look up to them, thinking they're the greatest, not knowing what lowlifes they really are and were." Well said, Wally. Hopefully they have or will face their comeuppance someday. Before we get to number 1, my name is Chills and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you're curious about what I look like in real life, then go to my Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT and tap that follow button to find out. It's a proven fact that generosity makes you a happier person, so if you're generous enough to hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it, then thank you. This way, you'll be notified of the new video we upload every Tuesday. Number 1. On the tracks. Another scary story of a body on the tracks, but this one may not have been there of its own accord. Redditor Edgar was on his way home from work on Chicago's CTA one night. He was nearly there when the train stopped abruptly. After a while, the conductor announced a delay over the PA, and they were played out with some elevator music. A half hour later, the conductor was on again. This time his voice was shaking. He informed passengers that there was a body on the tracks and that the power would be shut off for a while so that police could investigate. According to Edgar, the investigation took around 2 to 3 hours and no one could leave the train. The conductor made announcements and sounded as though he was going to cry from the stress of it all. As time ticked on, the passengers began to get antsy and complained that they should just be allowed to disembark. When the power finally returned, they were simply taken to the station, where they were finally allowed to disembark. Although no one had told the passengers what had happened, our friend Edgar did some investigative work. He writes, "It was a 15-year-old kid and no one knew why he was there." Another story that we'd all like to know more. Or maybe it's best to not know the rest of this very scary incident. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe because we upload new countdowns every Tuesday and Saturday. Or if you're still not convinced, here are some of our other videos that I think you'd like. Enjoy!